Hello YouTube, this is WolfHunter52, and do I have something to talk to you about today? I was sitting here in my dorm room, watching good old Cartoon Network, and something came on that caught my attention. I don't know if any of you will be familiar with this program. It recently aired in the first week of November of last year, 2014. That's still strange to be saying, but there you have it. It went from the 3rd to the 7th of November in a marathon on Cartoon Network. It was this mini-series, only 10 episodes long, called Over the Garden Wall. Now, I had never heard of this up until today, when I watched the entirety of the marathon of this short series on Cartoon Network as it was playing. And I figured I would come on here and talk about it because even though there were some parts that weren't so great, there is some genuinely good stuff about this miniseries. But I suppose I'll start from the beginning. The basic information about Over the Garden Wall is that it was done by the same guy who was behind stuff like the Misadventures of Flapjack and even the still popular Adventure Time. And it shows in the animation style that Over the Garden Wall uses. There's also the fact that they actually managed to get a really impressive cast involved in this. I know Elijah Wood plays the main character. Some boy named Colin Dean plays his younger brother. I'm not familiar with Colin Dean or his work. I know Christopher Lloyd showed up too as the woodsman here in the show, and their frog companion, who remains nameless for most of the series and seems to keep having his name changed in every other episode, was actually voiced by Jack Jones, who, if those of you who don't know him, he was actually a really famous blues singer in the 1960s. And, or not blues, I'm sorry, that's a lie. He was actually a jazz singer. I'm getting ahead of myself. See, because the music in the show is done by a blues singer who is, let's see, what was his name? C.W. Stone King. That's it. And C.W. Stone King, for those of you who probably don't know, because I didn't know either, he's an Australian blues singer. There you go. See the mix-up here? So we've got Jack Jones, the jazz star from the 1960s. We've got this C.W. Stone King, who only seems to have come into light in 2006. And then, to add to this amalgamation of talent, we have Samuel Raimi, not to be confused with Sam Raimi, the director and whatnot of stuff like the Evil Dead movies. No, this Samuel Raimi is actually a very famous opera singer. He's a bass with a very wide range, and he's actually, besides Elijah Wood and Christopher Lloyd, the only person involved in this show who I actually knew beforehand. Oh, and Jack Jones, of course, but since he doesn't talk much throughout the series, he does music in the background, and then There's occasionally times where his frog character will actually sing, and even then I couldn't identify that it was him. But I was surprised at the amount of talent they managed to get involved with this. And it was kind of nice to see a bunch of these people that a lot of people have forgotten about, especially Jack Jones. If you haven't heard any of his music, I'd recommend taking a look. He's not bad. But we're not here to talk about Jack Jones. We're here to talk about Over the Garden Wall. Now, Over the Garden Wall centers around Wirt and his brother Greg. Wirt is played by Elijah Wood, Greg by Colin Dean. And they become lost in this strange forest that is simply called the Unknown throughout the series. And I can't help but feel that that's it's supposed to have a deeper meaning, and it does kind of fit with the thought that it's a high school boy and his younger brother, and as they are marooned in this strange place all alone but for one another, they have to go and deal with all this unknown stuff. They don't know what they're going to encounter throughout the journey, but they have to face it regardless. So I feel it's smart in that it's deeper than just this basic story of, oh, a couple kids lost in the woods and they have to find their way. Um, so these two brothers lost in this forest, the unknown. They have to find their way home, and in order for them to do this, they have to travel across this apparently magic forest with the help of the wise elderly woodsman, played by Christopher Lloyd, and Beatrice, played by Melanie Linsky, who is a bluebird who travels with the boys in order to undo a curse that has affected her whole family. Her explanation was she threw a rock at a bluebird and it cursed her and her family, and they themselves turned into bluebirds. Um, Wirt, the elder brother, is a really worry prone, introverted kind of person, and he doesn't seem very strong willed. He's very quick to go along with what other people tell him to do. In fact, they even have the third episode centers around them making fun of the fact that he always does what people tell him. Um, his two passions are the clarinet and poetry. Excuse me. But he apparently keeps this hidden because he's afraid of being mocked by his fellow classmates. Um, Greg, on the other hand, his younger brother, is just all about goofing around and not having a care in the world, and he seems to constantly be the reason that these two brothers get in trouble. Like, he is always doing something to screw up whatever it is they're trying to do. I told you about the frog, the Jack Jones frog, who, like I said before, they don't really have a solid name for him until the end. And he can apparently only communicate through singing. And I really like these singing parts because, hey, it's Jack Jones. Can't really go wrong with that. And the music that they have Jack sing is actually pretty decent. I was surprised at a lot of the music that played during this miniseries. It's genuinely good. It's it's genuinely the kind of music that I could imagine downloading onto my MP3 player and listening to day to day. Now, um, stalking this main cast of people is simply this entity called the Beast. Um, he's played by Samuel Ramey, the opera singer, and he is this ancient creature who lures lost souls and leads them astray in the forest until they lose hope and they give up and they start turning into what are called these edelwood trees. Now, the only real purpose that these edelwood trees have is that if you put them in a machine, you can extract oil from them to keep this lantern that the woodsman carries around lit. Now, the reasoning for this lantern is that the beast has told the woodsman that the woodsman's daughter's soul is inside the lantern, and that's what's keeping it burning. Or she's being kept alive so long as the lantern burns. And so the woodsman needs the oil from these edelwood trees, these former people, these lost souls, in order to fuel this lantern, because if it ever goes out, then according to the beast, his daughter will be gone forever. And the woodsman doesn't want that. However, the woodsman, from the very get-go, he warns the main brothers about the beast. He tries to help lead them in the right direction. And even at the end, he is willing to give up all hope of ever seeing his daughter again, because he knows that trying to treat people's souls like this commodity that can be traded or purchased is wrong. And he says this specifically and even has a showdown with the beast, though most of it is shown off screen. And we only really see him confront the beast near the end when he the woodsman discovers, thanks to Wirt, who basically blurts out that the only reason the beast wants the lantern kept lit is because the beast's soul is what is in the lantern, and if it goes out, then of course the beast dies, and the beast doesn't want that. But the woodsman, after we catch a glimpse of the beast, and quite frankly, this is where the twisted, grotesque animation that I know Adventure Time has shown every now and then, it comes into play, and it's really effective. I'm pretty sure in the instance that I saw the beast's true form, he was just this amalgamation of like darkness and lost souls. And just there were twisted faces like peering out from his body. It was some fucked up stuff, let me tell you. But in the end, the woodsman blows out the lantern. The beast is defeated. Wirt and Greg give Beatrice this magical pair of scissors that they stole from a witch. That apparently how they work is if you use these scissors to cut off the wings of the bluebirds who were cursed into being bluebirds, that they will revert back to their human forms. And that does happen. You see at the end of the last episode that the birds have all been turned back into normal. Um, the woodsman sitting alone at his house, and all of a sudden his door opens and his daughter's there. And I also have to mention there was this character called Auntie Whispers who was voiced by none other than our good friend Tim Curry. And they actually managed to fool me with this character. From the very moment she steps in, first of all, she's like ugly as sin. And she keeps talking like she's gonna eat Wirt and Greg. But you actually find out that the little girl that she is taking care of, whose name is let's see, what was her name? God, I can't remember her name. Oh, right, episode 7. Lorna. This young girl named Lorna, who Auntie Whispers controls by ringing this magical bell. You find out that Auntie Whisper was actually the good guy and was trying to warn these two brothers that if Lorna stopped doing these menial tasks that Auntie Whispers is basically enchanting her to do, that the demon that is currently possessing Lorna will take over her body and make her consume the brothers. However, through what I can only chalk up as sheer dumb luck, um, the the Jack Jones frog eats this bell, and Wirt rings it and tells the demon to leave Lorna's body forever and never come back. And it does. And that plot thread pretty much just it disappears after that. And then we get a non sequitur in which we find out that Wirt and Greg are actually from modern times, and it was Halloween, and Wirt put together the tape for a girl that he liked named Sarah, and on it he has some poetry that he's written. He has clips of himself playing his clarinet, and he goes to this football game to try and give it to her, but he's about to chicken out. So Greg, his younger brother, takes the tape, gives it to some of Sarah's friends, who put it in Sarah's jacket. Wirt tries to get the tape back, but he ultimately can't. Sarah and a bunch of her friends go to the graveyard, including this boy that Wirt thinks she will want to go out with, this Jason Funderburger, who honestly there was nothing likable about him. I don't understand how Wirt would even think that he was out of the running because of this Jason guy. Jason was quite frankly a loser, no matter how you looked at him. And so they meet up at this Halloween party, and then they go to the graveyard, and they're telling ghost stories when Greg tries to create a distraction, which doesn't work. He ends up spoiling where Wirt's hiding. Wirt comes out, tries to make small talk, and then all of a sudden the police show up, and all the kids run away, including Wirt and Greg. And in order to get away from the police, Wirt and Greg climb this cemetery wall, and they jump over it onto the other side, onto these train tracks. However, a train comes, and Wirt pulls Greg and himself out of the way, but in doing so, they end up rolling down a cliff. Well, not a cliff. They roll down a hill into a lake, and they're knocked unconscious. And so the entire journey of Over the Garden Wall, you basically assume is just the fantasies of these two boys as they're unconscious. But then when they when Wirt wakes back up and he pulls himself and Greg out of this lake and they get found by the rescue party and taken to the hospital and all that, you not only see that Greg still has that frog, but inside of the frog is still the glowing bell, which means that everything that they had dreamt of happening actually in reality happened, and it wasn't just a dream. So that kind of threw me through a loop. But other than that, though, this special or this miniseries was surprisingly good. I got I got annoyed by Greg. Um, I don't think there's anybody who would watch this who would actually like Greg. I mean, I've seen annoying characters. I've sat through the Misadventures of Flapjack. I was an avid fan of Chowder as a child, and just everything about Greg rubs me the wrong way. In fact, I'm pretty sure that I only held on to finish the series because I was curious about where they were going to go with the woodsman and the beast, because they build up the beast for the entire series. And besides for that little instant that I referred to earlier when he's actually illuminated by this lantern, all you ever see from him is his outline and his eyes. You see these like antler like horns on his head, and you just see these piercing white eyes. However, the eyes change color in the last episode when he is confronting the woodsman and Wirt and leading up to his death. You actually see a change in color in the beast's eyes. Is that everything I wanted to cover? Yeah. So that's Over the Garden Wall. If you haven't seen it, yeah, check it out. It's it's strange at times. It'll get a little annoying, but for the most part, it has a really good story. It 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 masters this intrigue for this case of the beast. It really keeps that suspenseful, and it keeps you wondering what's going to happen next. And that's the whole reason I kept watching to the end. Christopher Lloyd is always a delight to hear his voice and things. Um, Elijah Wood wasn't bad. I thought he was pretty good. And of course, Jack Jones and Samuel Ramey. Now, if you'll excuse me, I think I'm gonna go see if I can find the Over the Garden Wall soundtrack and track down a couple of those songs that caught my ear during the viewing. So, thanks for listening, YouTube. I'm WolfHunter52. Happy New Year. I'm a little bit late for that. and I will see you all next time here on my channel. Toodaloo!